Well, class, I'm curious where everyone said that many of our influences of rights came from. And the answer is many of them came from previous rights established in England from about the 13th century all the way to the 17th century. So, about a period of about 500 years, which is quite a bit of time. We haven't even been a country for 500 years. And at this point, England had already been a country for really about another 500 years, roughly. So it's a big span of time, and obviously that influences people for years to come. So in today's lesson, we're going to be talking about the how these documents influenced our rights, but also how their experience or how they came about shaped our experience too. And one thing I want you to pay attention to is A, the rights granted here, and the idea that they're supposed to be granted to everyone as time goes on, and B, the fact that oftentimes these rights came about because government was abusing its power. One thing we're really going after in this unit is why do we need a strong yet limited government? And so these can really serve as examples for you to look for the ways that government needs to be limited. And effectively, these documents that we're going to go over do that. There is a note-taking guide here. As we go forward, just please make sure you use a copy. There's some questions here as you go along. I would like you to write those as well. I didn't fill in everything. You'll notice that you'll have to fill in pieces there, but I gave you prompts on where you can fill them in. So excuse that. So many of these early documents essentially are going to form a constitution. You might be wondering, what is a constitution? You've probably heard the phrase, the U.S. Constitution, but what is it exactly? Well, according to Merriam-Webster, can be defined as, well, two of the definitions fit here. One would be a body of fundamental principles or established precedents according to which a state or other organization is acknowledged to be governed. So the Constitution paid close attention to that, which is state or other organization is acknowledged to be governed. So it's when the state says we are governed by this document or these principles or these precedents. Is also the mode in which a state or society is organized, especially in the manner in which a sovereign power is distributed. This will be a little bit more important for our Constitution, but for today's lesson, really just focus on number one. But you should probably know both. So especially when we get to this unit. The three documents we're going to go over include the Magna Carta, the Petition of Right, and the English Bill of Rights. Let's first start with the Magna Carta. A little bit of historical information first. It was digitally signed by King John in 1215. That's not entirely accurate. I'm going to play this video for you guys in a second, but from a historical standpoint, there's actually only four Magna Cartas remaining. You'll see there was numerous copies. And if you ever want to see one, there's one in the National Archives in Washington, D.C. It's, for a nerd like me, it's pretty cool. It's really hard to read, but it's under really low light because actually sunlight or light in general will damage documents like that, so you can't take pictures. There's some interesting things, but you could actually go see it, and it is really cool to see a document that's almost 1,000 years old. It's still alive. Well, let's watch this video on the importance of the Magna Carta and what it did.
This may look like a plain, unassuming piece of parchment, but is actually one of the most famous documents in the world. Magna Carta, meaning the Great Charter, has inspired people across the centuries, from Thomas Jefferson to Mahatma Gandhi. But why was the Charter originally created, and what does it actually say? Let us take you back to medieval England. It's the year 1215, and the ruler is King John. Many people believe that King John was one of the worst kings in history. He imprisoned his former wife, he starved his opponents to death, he allegedly murdered his own nephew, and pulled the beards of the Irish chiefs. King John had imposed heavy taxes on his barons in order to pay for his expensive foreign wars. If they refused to pay, he punished them severely or seized their property. The barons demanded that King John obey the law.
Just a quick note, when I was in Ireland, actually, there was actually evidence of King John's reign in some ways. So I visited this old abbey that had been around for 500 years at the time, and it was actually destroyed by King John's government around the same time, actually. And it's interesting to note that there would have been this huge preservation of literature and writing and architecture, and yet it was destroyed because the local people weren't complying. So just a little bit of a personal note there.
When he refused, they captured London, and John was forced to negotiate. The two sides met at Runnymede in June 1215. The result of the negotiations was written down by the king's clerks into the document we know as Magna Carta. Although most of the Charter's clauses dealt with medieval rights and customs, Magna Carta has become a powerful symbol of liberty around the world. The most famous clause, which is still part of the law today, for the first time gave all free men the right to justice and a fair trial. No man shall be arrested or imprisoned except by the judgment of their equals and by the law of the land. To no one will we sell. However, this clause was not as liberal as it sounds. The Charter only applied to free men. The vast majority of people in 1215 were unfree peasants who were ruled over by their landowners.
So this is a key point. The Magna Carta only really was there for nobles. And what they're talking about is the idea that you can't be in prison without the preview or the view of your peers. Really is the idea of trial by jury. It's something called habeas corpus.
And although Magna Carta was intended to create peace between King John and his rebellious barons, England was plunged into civil war after the Pope declared the Charter invalid. When King John died of dysentery in 1216, 9-year-old Henry III took to the throne. To keep the peace, Magna Carta was reissued several times during the 13th century, until it was finally made part of English law. Magna Carta has lived on for 800 years and is echoed in the United States Declaration of Independence and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Perhaps Magna Carta's most important legacy is that everyone, including our leaders, must obey the law. What started out as a document of specific complaints from a group of barons has turned into an international symbol of liberty, without which we might not have the rights we value so much today.